world is changed forever by a new technology, nuclear. Two superpowers dominate the world, each facing the other in a state of neither war nor peace. This is the story of the Cold War, how the push of one button could lead to total global destruction.
Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames.
How the struggle between two political systems caused millions to suffer.
Spy was very much part of the Cold War.
And how a world was created which lived in constant fear. Mad world, mutually assured destruction. In this episode, World War II comes to an end, but the result is not world peace. Tensions soar, territories are seized. A new weapon and new frontiers mark the start of the Cold War. The rise of the superpowers. Germany surrendered in May 1945, leaving Japan alone, still fighting the Allies. Terrible destruction descended.
Where there had been a distinct city below us, there was nothing down there but what, in my vernacular, was a black boiling mess.
Most of the city appears to have been obliterated. 4 square miles of desolation are reported.
And that cloud up above it was just tumbling and rolling. You could see the energy that was in it.
Hiroshima, the 6th of August, 1945. Perhaps as many as 70,000 people are instantly killed by just one single bomb.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT.
Was very hard-headed, including about, not losing troops in Japan, so he made the decision to drop the atom bomb once he knew about it.
There is more to come.
That's the atomic bomb exploding at Nagasaki. All of you who see this picture can judge for yourselves the extent of the menace to civilization of this new weapon.
It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
The bomb has been used on human beings. Twice.
It was a global world-scale war, so I think there's a very strong argument that the use of those weapons to end the war quicker without having to address a conventional invasion of Japan, very legitimate.
The USA celebrates the new superweapon. They are the only nation that possesses the bomb. Something horrific has been invented, and it cannot be uninvented.
I don't think nuclear weapons were necessary to bring a swift end to World War II. Japanese scholars are now almost unanimous in saying, no, it was not Hiroshima and Nagasaki that led us to sue for peace. It was Russia's entry into the war that same week. That was the decisive factor. The one great achievement of nuclear weapons in most people's mind, that it did save a catastrophically prolonged war on the Japanese landmass, even that disappears on closer evaluation.
Will this power, now available to man, bring another, even more suicidal war upon us? Or can it be made to rule out war and open a new, progressive chapter of history, the atomic age?
The weapons used to end the Cold War with Japan marked the beginning of a new conflict. It is a conflict where astronomical amounts of money will be spent on weapons. It will last nearly 50 years. And if it escalates, it will mark the end of human civilization. It is the Cold War.
This is Movie Tone, rejoicing with you in victory.
3 months earlier in Europe, VE Day. Victory has been won over Germany. Its evil leader, Adolf Hitler, is dead. 6 years of horrendous suffering have come to a close. World War II is almost over. As the guns in Europe go silent, a meeting in the USA aims to ensure a war like the last one never happens again.
San Francisco, where 50 United Nations have been working for 8 weeks to produce a charter on which the future of world peace will depend.
It is now my duty to call for a vote on the approval of the Charter of the United Nations.
Dr. Wellington Koo signed first for China. Then, one by one, all the countries represented at San Francisco signed the Charter of Freedom and Peace on which the hopes of the whole world are centered.
This new structure of peace is rising upon strong foundations. Let us not fail to grasp this supreme chance to establish a worldwide rule of reason, to create an enduring peace under the guidance of God.
The United Nations is born. 50 nations sign the charter. Russia joins the pledge for world peace. Despite fears for the future, it is a moment of great optimism.
Men and women chosen to represent the vast majority of mankind in this new effort to make life safe for the ordinary citizen throughout the globe. In a disillusioned world, some may think such a task impossible. But given goodwill, it is of course not impossible, and the alternative is world destruction.
Two turning points in history create the Cold War. The atomic bomb is one. The second threatens to start another worldwide nuclear war.
Communism is based on the belief that man is so weak and inadequate that he is unable to govern himself and therefore requires the rule of strong masters.
Communism, a revolutionary form of government in Russia since 1917.
Moscow's Red Square was the spacious and impressive setting for the Red Army's first victory parade.
The Cold War was actually a confrontation of two ideologies, communism versus capitalism. As simple as that.
Well, I thought communism was, in theory, better than democracy, but unfortunately, as Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst of all forms of government except for all the rest.
Russia was always a doubtful partner for the Allies. Communist ideology here is at odds with capitalism. The totalitarian state is at odds with Western democracy.
We were brainwashed, educated at school to hate the West. The fat, big capitalists who were bent on conquering the USSR.
Known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics since the revolution, Russia is ruled by Joseph Stalin, General Secretary of the Communist Party.
This great leader of the proletariat, who was a genius of all times.
Today, Stalin watches with pride as units of the Red Air Force fly over the Soviet capital.
Stalin has big plans for communism. He's already made a move at the Allied Peace Conference just before the close of World War II.
The Livadia Palace at Yalta was the scene of the conference, a sumptuous-looking place which used to be occupied by the Tsar when he took a winter holiday in the Crimea.
Yalta, plans are made to divide Europe between the four victorious parties: Britain, the United States, France, and the Soviet Union. Germany will be divided in four. The eastern part will be run by the USSR. Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt acknowledged that Eastern Europe, occupied by the Red Army, is Stalin's.
It is crazy. And the whole partitioning of the world between the great powers, as you know, in Yalta when they got together and they've kind of had this little piece of paper in which they scribbled, 70% of Poland to you, 20% to us, and all that, So, we've got to where we've got.
I think the government, because of the sickness of Roosevelt and the ascension to power of President Truman, trying to learn to deal with Stalin and Churchill, led to some belief that the Russians would treat the Eastern European better.
The Polish election was a test. The Soviets pledged a free democratic election in Poland. There was wrangling and delay, and when the election was finally held, it was a totalitarian affair staged by a Red dictatorship. Red Marshal Tito established a communist dictatorship in Yugoslavia. Hungarian Premier Nagy, whose democratic government was overthrown by the communists, a culminating violation of Soviet pledges of democratic liberties.
There was a rigged election in Hungary, which the communists rigged, or the Soviets rigged, and the communists came to power and Hungary became part of the Soviet orbit.
One after the other, Eastern European nations come under direct Soviet control.
You took it for granted. Soviets have liberated Europe. And therefore, we've liberated them from capitalists, from any other kind of ambiguity about who they were.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
Well, I think the Iron Curtain was a very big surprise, a very unpleasant surprise. I think it led to the famous speech by Churchill to wake up the Americans that despite all the costs and the great victory of World War II, there now seemed to be some people who wanted to cause more trouble, to create another warlike situation, and that country that was going to do that was the Soviet Union.
The United States makes an attempt to revive Europe with the Marshall Plan. This financial support project offers to include the Eastern Bloc countries as well as the USSR. Ordinary Americans get involved.
Consoling thought in these days of supplementary budgets. The Citizens Food Committee in America had been asking for public donations of staple foodstuffs.
He is giving generously, as are thousands young and old who wish to aid our friends abroad who face either untold suffering or communist control.
The Friendship Train, an idea sparked by a Washington journalist that inspires generosity across the USA.
During its journey across the continent. Everywhere, great crowds turned out to endorse this expression of America's goodwill and practical aid for the free nations of Western Europe.
In addition to milk, canned goods, and other food products, gifts of money have been collected. Stockton, California is another stop on the Friendship route, over which the railroads are carrying the train at no cost as their part of the gift grant.
The train travels from coast to coast, collecting food, fuel, and clothes, making over 40 stops on the way.
New carloads of vital supplies are coupled on at each stop, and the train is expected to arrive in New York in 2 sections, hauling 200 cars.
The cargo, valued at about $40 million, is shipped to France and given out across Europe in support of the Marshall Plan. But Stalin refuses to allow Marshall aid in his communist world.
Recriminations and refusal. Molotov quitting the conference and denouncing the Marshall Plan. The cleavage between West and East becomes an economic division. The line of the Iron Curtain now separates Western and Soviet economic spheres as the representatives of the free nations of the West go ahead without Russia. The big powers invite all Europe to join the parley. All Soviet satellites reject.
Winston Churchill publicizes a name for the line dividing communist Eastern Europe from the West.
You know, when we were leaving Lithuania, my parents initially thought they would do it legitimately. So they went to the Russian consulate and asked for permission to leave. And the answer they got, it says, listen, nothing leaves. Even the birds are not going to fly out if we can figure out how to stop them.
Barbed wire and watchtowers have closed off the East. The Soviet threat is real. The Cold War has begun.